The sea is dark, the wind howls, and waves crash like thunder. Suddenly, cutting through the mist, a shadow appears. Long, sleek, dragon-headed ships racing across the water. Faster than anything seen before, these vessels strike terror into coastal towns. They are Viking longships, not just boats, but weapons of conquest, engines of exploration, and symbols of power. How did these ships make the Vikings unstoppable for centuries? Let's uncover the secret of the longships. To understand the Viking longship, we have to go back to the world of the Vikings themselves. Scandinavia, the homeland of the Norse people, was a place of rugged mountains, deep forests, and endless seas. Life was tough. Farming gave food, but it was never enough. The sea was both a barrier and a promise, dangerous, but full of opportunities. The Vikings learned very early that if they wanted to survive, thrive, and expand, they had to master the sea. This mastery began with boats. Before the longship, Norsemen already built simple wooden vessels for fishing and local travel. But these were small, slow, and limited. They couldn't carry warriors across oceans or strike fear into distant lands. The need for something faster, stronger, and more flexible was clear. The answer came in the form of the longship, a revolutionary design born from centuries of experimentation. The earliest versions date back to around 400 to 500 AD, long before the Viking Age officially began. These early ships were smaller, but they carried the DNA of what would become the most advanced naval technology of the Middle Ages. By the late 700s, just as the Viking Age was beginning, the design had evolved into the perfect war machine. The longship was unlike anything the rest of Europe had ever seen. While kingdoms built heavy cargo vessels or clumsy warboats, the Norse perfected a ship that was light, fast, and terrifyingly efficient. Why was this so important? Because geography shaped destiny. Scandinavia was cut off from fertile farmland, but surrounded by coastlines and rivers. Ships were not just useful, they were essential for survival. The longship was not simply a tool, it was the beating heart of Viking society. Without it, there would have been no raids, no trade, no settlements in distant lands. In a very real sense, the Viking Age itself existed because of the longship. The longship became a symbol of freedom and opportunity. It allowed poor farmers to dream of wealth, young warriors to seek glory, and entire families to imagine new homes across the sea. For the Vikings, the sea was no longer a boundary, it was a highway. And the longship was their ticket to dominance. The birth of the longship was the birth of the Viking Age itself. From the first raids at Lindisfarne to the exploration of America centuries later, it all began with this incredible invention. If the birth of the longship gave the Vikings their power, its design was the secret to their success. Every curve, every plank of wood, every rope was crafted with purpose. To understand why the Vikings dominated the seas, we have to look closely at how these ships were built. The first thing that stood out about a Viking longship was its shape. Long, narrow, and sleek, it was designed to cut through water with incredible speed. While European ships of the time were bulky and slow, the Viking longship was fast and light. This speed meant the Vikings could appear on enemy shores suddenly, raid and vanish before defenders even had time to react. The clinker-built hull, with overlapping planks like fish scales, made the ship both strong and flexible. Waves that could break lesser ships were absorbed by this design. The shallow keel allowed them to glide into rivers and land directly on beaches, striking anywhere without ports or harbors. Then, there was the dual power system. Square sails when the wind was right, oars when it was not. Warriors doubled as rowers, their shields lining the ship's sides. It was both war machine and transport, both flexible and deadly. And of course, the dragon-headed prow, a psychological weapon, frightening enemies before the battle even began. The longship was centuries ahead of its time. Light enough to be carried across land, strong enough to cross the Atlantic, fast enough to outmaneuver enemies, and shallow enough to raid deep inland. It was the perfect weapon of war and tool of discovery. The longship revealed its true power in war. In 793 AD, at Lindisfarne, monks praying in peace heard the sound of oars. Within moments, longships landed on their beach, and armed Vikings stormed ashore. Europe was forever changed. The longship made raids terrifyingly effective. Vikings didn't need harbors. They could land on any shore, strike, and vanish before defenders reacted. They could sail upriver into the heart of kingdoms, raiding Paris, London, and countless other cities. No place was safe. Each warrior on board was both rower and fighter, shields lining the rails like armor for the ship itself. Fleets could scatter or regroup at will, surrounding enemies or retreating faster than pursuit was possible. The longship was not just about strength, it was about fear. Its dragon prows became symbols of terror across Europe. Kings paid tribute simply to avoid their arrival. It turned ordinary farmers into raiders, and raiders into conquerors. By the 9th and 10th centuries, Viking fleets numbered in the hundreds. These weren't just pirates. They were armies with navies, using longships like modern carriers. With them, Vikings carved out kingdoms across Europe. The sound of their oars was the sound of dread. But the longship was more than a weapon. It was also a vessel of discovery. With it, the Vikings sailed farther than any Europeans of their time. They settled Iceland, then Greenland, and around the year 1000, Leif Erikson reached North America, Vinland, nearly 500 years before Columbus. To the east, they followed rivers deep into Russia, founding the roots of Kievan Rus. They reached Constantinople, where Norsemen even became the emperor's bodyguards in the elite Varangian Guard. They traded furs, amber, and slaves for silver, silks, and spices. Coins from the Islamic world, found in Viking hoards, prove the vastness of their networks. The same shallow draft that let them raid rivers also let them explore them. The same speed that terrified enemies also made them successful traders. The same design that carried warriors also carried settlers and families, founding cities like Dublin, York, and Normandy. The longship didn't just take, it connected. It turned the world into a highway, making faraway lands part of the Viking story. Though the Viking Age ended, the legacy of the longship lived on. Its clinker-built hull inspired European shipbuilding for centuries. Its image, dragon heads, striped sails, shields on the rails, became eternal symbols of Norse culture. Archaeological finds like the Oseberg ship remind us of Viking craftsmanship. Replicas built today still sail oceans, proving the genius of their design. But more than technology, the longship carries a legacy of courage. It represents the human spirit of adventure, the willingness to leave safety behind and face the unknown. The longship gave birth to kingdoms, carried families to new homelands, and spread culture across continents. Even now, when thunder rolls and waves crash, we remember the Vikings and their ships that once ruled the seas. The Vikings may have vanished 1,000 years ago, but the spirit of the longship still sails with us, in our stories, in our history, and in our imagination. If you enjoyed this journey into the story of Viking longships, give this video a like, subscribe to Eternal Viking for more epic tales of Norse mythology and history, and tell us in the comments. Would you have had the courage to sail into the unknown on a Viking longship? Join us again next week as we uncover more secrets of the Viking world. Until then, may the spirit of the longship sail with you.